Hi,
Should we get...
Stephanie.
Hi, Renee.
Okay, so we'll start out this interview the way that I start out each of them. Do you consider yourself to be a data scientist?
Yes, I do. So, my background actually leans towards data science really strongly. I was lucky enough that before data science became this cool thing, that just following what I enjoyed it seemed to really kind of lead me in that path. I started out in really heavy mathematics, and so my bachelor's and my master's are both in math. Um, but I focused more on like applied types of mathematics during my undergrad towards biology and kind of the medical field and things. And then during my master's degree, it was more of like a strictly pure math as far as my thesis went and things like that. So then I knew I wanted to focus more applied again.
Mhm.
So I began a PhD in computer engineering, focusing in machine learning, which was perfect, and I really enjoyed it. Then, of course, I got a job offer, and so I left to work for the government and doing exactly what I wanted to do, which was,
Okay. Well, before you get
working
too
on.
far, let's go back and go through that in detail.
Okay.
So, when you were a kid, so you mentioned your bachelor's, before you even went to college, were you especially good at math? Was there an indication that you would go into a math field?
Yeah, I would have to say so. Early on, I participated in things like Odyssey of the Mind, as well as like gifted and talented math classes. And then I was in a really bad car wreck when I was 16, which made it so I had to relearn how to read. So one of the only
Wow.
things that didn't seem to be very heavily impacted by that was my talent in math. So I kind of really hung on to that pretty strong after that.
Wow. So, did you know from the beginning that you wanted to do math in college when you applied to schools?
No, I'm one of those people who like wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I good at problem solving and I enjoyed just solving different problems, but I always thought that like being in math meant I had to be a math teacher. And I knew I wouldn't be good at that. So I started in Spanish and then I was in accounting and then I moved to engineering. And then while I was in engineering, I took calculus and started to get to know some of the professors and teachers who explained to me all the wonderful things you could do with mathematics. And I was like, whoa, that's where I need to be. So from there on, that's kind of how I still ended up in the math track as far as my degrees go.
Okay, so where was your undergrad degree at, and what did you do right after undergrad?
I went to Colorado State for my bachelor's, and then I went straight to East Tennessee State, where I participated in a National Science Foundation fellowship, studying graph theory and working with an underprivileged elementary school, teaching them mathematics, and I created a math club and fun things like that. So,
And did you tell them all the things that you can do with math other than teach?
yes, I did. In fact, I spent quite a bit of time trying to communicate that with the different classes that I worked with, just to let them know that being in math doesn't mean you're a teacher necessarily. Not that we don't really need great teachers, but there are other options. So,
So, what are some of the options that excited them the most?
well, as far as learning about what kinds of things they could do, that they weren't as interested in is being able to figure out how many hours they would have to work to get an iPod. So we brought in like these magazines from Target, and I was like, now pick out things that you would want for Christmas. And then, then they would get to pick different jobs that were at different rates per hour, and they could figure out how many hours they would have to work in order to get their iPod or to get their whatever it is they wanted out of the magazine, which was kind of fun.
That's
That was
cool.
probably their favorite thing, as far as they didn't really care about what the job was as much as trying to figure out how much money they could have.
I used to do that in high school too because I worked at a fabric and craft store, and there were all these cool crafts, and I wanted to buy everything. And then I started figuring out how many hours I was working just to buy things at the place where I worked.
Right, you're
That's
like, I'm
really
just going to
cheap.
sign my paycheck over.
Yeah.
That's fun.
All right. So, what was your NSF grant? What were you doing in school?
So I was working in graph theory, and so the main thing was to be able to migrate both like biology and other sciences in with mathematics, and then being able to bring that to the elementary school. So that was the main focus there. My research was in graph theory, specifically total domination within graphs and whatnot. So,
And what does that mean for people that don't know?
oh, it's not a very good way to explain this.
Or maybe just the basics of graph theory. Like, what is the type of thing that you could research knowing what you knew?
Yeah, so with graph theory, it applies mostly to things like social networks or computer networks and things like that. So when you think about a lot about people making their Facebook graph, so you have like you're a node and then you're attached to other people. So essentially, it was just studying the properties and the changes within those kinds of graphs, and but from a pure mathematics standpoint, we didn't look at it in any applied way. It was more like parameters that you could use to describe the graphs, which it can be put into applied. So there was a point where I worked on a project where we were studying the differences and predicting things with amino acids, and so being able to structure those in a graph and then apply different kinds of graph parameters to it, you can actually use those for prediction even if they're not biologically inspired.
Okay, and with the social networking, were you studying something like how the social network grew, or how different types of relationships between groups of people? I mean, what was it you were looking at with the relationship graph?
Well, as far as the relationships graph goes, I didn't really work with that until I got into industry and whatnot. So.
Okay, so what type of projects did you do in school that made you decide that you definitely wanted to stick with this data science thing?
Well, I just liked being able to use math to do cool things. As a very patriotic family, my father, my grandfathers, my brother, everybody's in the military, and we're very focused on, serving your country before you start to ask for things from your country. And I knew I would never be the boots on the ground kind of girl, so the way I felt like I could contribute would be being able to use mathematics to do cool things in the defense sector or in the medical field and things like that. So I just kind of kept pushing that direction in hopes that I could get a job with the government to be able to support the troops in a way that made more sense for me. And so I just kind of kept following, what was fun, and then hope that that would eventually lead to there. But it was more like, hey, machine learning is cool. Let's see what I can do with it. More than anything, I just kept taking courses that I liked, and most importantly, probably would be the relationships I built with professors. Talking to them about their research, what kinds of things they like to do, what things they have done, and where different fields could take me and how they could be applied. And building those relationships with the professors was extremely helpful as far as knowing what the next steps are. Because you don't have enough data to make your own decisions, I feel, early on.
So with wanting to work with the military, did you think you were going to be working with like operations research or information analysis or something like that?
Honestly, I didn't know. I just kind of knew that was part of my in-game plan.
And were the professors helpful in directing you towards what types of military or government jobs would use math?
Yeah. I worked with a couple of different professors. Dr. Langston at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where I started my PhD work. He and I had actually met before I picked my PhD school, and we actually were working on this problem on a napkin in a restaurant, and it turned into a paper and a relationship between my master's school and the school I chose to go to for my PhD.
Wow.
But he was amazing about talking about all these things I could do with graph theory and how you really need to combine those with machine learning and whatnot. And so then just that kind of shoved me into machine learning, where University of Tennessee, Knoxville has a whole bunch of different really cool machine learning labs where you can essentially learn about all the different kinds of machine learning, whether it's distributive or agent-based and classification, all these kinds of different things. And So there was just so many options there that it was a good pick for me to go and just play.
That's great. So what are those different types of machine learning, and what kind of projects were they doing there at the university?
Yeah, so I focus mostly in the reinforcement learning, which is very agent-based. So that's like we had robot dogs, and you figure out how to use machine learning, reinforcement learning specifically, to teach them how to navigate a maze, and those kinds of things, or recycling robots, or different kinds of agents to play games. So one of the projects I did was given a Connect 4 board, which actually shrank because the state space was so huge. Could you design an agent that could essentially beat a human? And so that was kind of fun. So we did things like that within the reinforcement learning realm. Then there's also the distributive learning, which was more like multiple entities working together. So you can think of more like a smart house. So like your thermostat is talking to your door, which is talking to your AC and your dishwasher and all your other different pieces kind of talking together in order to collaboratively build a smart, comfortable home. Those kinds of things. So I didn't work in that industry as much, which actually would have been cool, but you kind of had to pick one, and I picked what was fun.
So tell us a little more about reinforcement learning. What type of tools did you use, and were you programming, or what was your role in the different projects?
Yeah, so I did some, I guess it'd be more like scripting. MATLAB, I guess, it's kind of in the middle, right? It's not really programming, but it's not really scripting. So anyway, so we used MATLAB most of the time, which of course works in grad school, and then you get to the real world and everything's too big for MATLAB. But at the time it worked out really well, even though sometimes things ran too fast or too slow. Yeah. But so I worked mostly with the Infant Action Perception Lab on campus, which was a lab that actually had parents that volunteered their children to be parts of different studies. So we were collecting data of eye tracking for infants. So they had all this really cool data where essentially babies hung out and looked at pictures and of like duckies. They made them fun, at least, teddy bears and things. And so we're trying to look at how a human would actually scan an image versus this regular, like across kind of, digital way that we would think of like a computer would look at an image. So I worked with them to get their data in order to kind of try to see if we can't help them explain why these infants were looking at different things as the exchange for their data, so that we could see if we could not use apprenticeship learning and reinforcement learning together to teach an agent to be able to scan images like a human would. Because you can't use people, because at our point we think too much when we're looking at it now. If like in order to remove that extra bit of I'm thinking about you're looking at me thinking about looking at something. You have to use small children. So I was working on that. It was a lot of fun.
And so were you trying to train the robots to use computer vision that would jump around the image similar to an infant?
Yeah, be able to essentially pick out what the important pieces were first, instead of actually scanning the entire image. So.
Okay, and then you mentioned that you jumped straight from your PhD program to a job. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so in between my master's and my PhD, I originally had applied for a job in the Department of Defense, and then I got the scholarship for my PhD, so I was like, oh, I'm going to go do this. Then again, towards the end of my first year, they contacted me and said, hey, we have a different position for you. It's data science, it's on a cluster, and it's doing machine learning and all these things. And I was like, well, wow, that's what I want to do when I'm done. So I kind of went and did that for a little while. There's not a whole lot about that I can discuss, except for, I guess, more of the interactions. It was a really good place for me to grow and learn from a lot of people who'd been doing data science in industry before it became this data science thing.
So you've talked a lot about professors and then people in industry that were kind of mentors to you. So what advice do you have for people for finding the right type of mentors and identifying, who's really going to back you throughout the learning process?
Yeah, it's so important. I really feel like the people who helped me throughout my pre-career were extremely vital. And I just, I kind of gravitated to the people who seemed to enjoy things I enjoyed. And then being able to share that same kind of passion helps people bond. It seems strange for somebody to be like, oh yeah, we bonded over complex analysis. But that's exactly what happens, going in to talk to professors about problems and what you're thinking about, and then those that seem to really click with you and enjoy the things you do, just talk to them. They're usually very open. And then in industry as well, finding those people who are willing to help you learn how to fish instead of give you the answers is the key. I had one specific colleague early on while working for the government that I was like, no, I just want to know how to do this one thing. And he's like, no. He's like, I'm going to teach you how to fish. And I was like, what? He's like, if I give you a fish, in 10 minutes you're going to be asking me another question. I was like, oh. He's like, but if I teach you how to figure out the answer yourself, then you'll be set. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And I worked a lot with him, and he was extremely helpful. In fact, I learned a lot from several people there, but it was just really nice to find people who wanted to teach me how to do things instead of just give me answers. So seeking out those kinds of relationships is good.
Great. And I'm sure that's important, especially with data science, because as we've heard from other interviews, you're constantly learning. So knowing how to learn and how to find resources is really important in this kind of job.
Yeah. I also think it really helps when you see people that you can identify with in positions that you want to hold. So both in my undergrad and then in my master's, my research advisors were both women, which is not always necessary, but it is really nice to see extremely smart, powerful women in positions that are like authoritative and that are making a difference and groundbreaking. And so both of them were very helped me be able to see that my path could lead further instead of just seeing all men, to be honest.
Yeah, so in a lot of your classes, if you were in a machine learning program and then you ended up working, in the government, were a lot of your classes mostly male?
Oh, yes. I had one pattern recognition course where the teacher, he thought he was so funny. He would be like, so what's the probability of a woman walking in the door? And I'm like, there's 40 of us and it's just me. And every day, that's the same. Like, it's not funny, more funny every day that you say it.
Oh my gosh. And you just keep at that all the time.
Yeah, like, there's still only me.
Maybe you were like the first woman he ever had in a class.
But the one thing about grad school is there was like a very small cohort of us women and everybody else was men. So we got to be pretty close, which was nice.
And have you kept in touch and used that network as you've moved into your career?
I wouldn't say that I've necessarily leveraged the network. Well, maybe that's not true. To a certain extent, I think we all have. But yeah, we stay connected. I have some of those ladies are at companies or in the government, and like Samantha Track, she's an extremely talented woman. We went to grad school together, and she eventually came to Booz Allen to work with me, and well, not necessarily with me, but because I enjoyed it so much, I was able to kind of pull her in right before I left. But yeah, it's important to have those relationships, I suppose, so you can continue to stay connected in like the outer part of the world. So we have a tendency to focus in, and we live in a hole somewhat, or cave maybe. So it's good to have those extra little tentacles that stay out amongst the rest of the world.
Yeah, definitely. So I was reading your profile, and when you got to Booz Allen, you did some big things from the point of view of data science stuff. So tell us about your time there and what you did.
Oh, it was an amazing time. They actually have a really talented data science team, which allowed me to kind of learn things from people who specialize in lots of different areas, which is nice. So they have somebody you can talk to about text, or if I have a question about and different kinds of NLP. That there's somebody I can talk to about that, which is really nice. But because we had such a nice sized data science team, we were able to do other, I guess, more extracurricular activities than you would normally see at a consulting firm. So one of the things that was really a lot of fun, I did explore data science, which you're like this little astronaut and you're traveling from planet to planet learning algorithms. And the whole course is Python based, and that was a lot of fun. That was kind of my baby as it grew up. And
Is that the one that's now through Metis?
Yeah. So Metis are, I think Kaplan and Metis are the same company. I don't know, but so they've purchased it and they now run it. But
I actually just got access to that, so I'm excited to check it out.
Nice. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's nice to be able to do data science in a way that's more like a. It's like
So what was your
enough
role
like a
in
game that
making
it's
that?
fun. Huh?
Yeah, what was your role in that?
So I was the team lead and one of the major content developers. So we contracted with a company called Code School, which is like they build all these different courses, right? So they did the graphics and the cool stuff like that. And then I, wrote out, well, what is linear regression and those kinds of things. And then I also had 3 or 4 other people who also built out content for different things. Basically, when data scientists that were available had time, we were like, hey, pick a topic that you enjoy and then build out a module on it. And it turned out to be like a really good way to do things because everybody has their own specialty. So that was really a lot of fun. And
So each module of the course is kind of created by a different little team?
Yeah, well, at least by a different person.
Okay.
We reviewed each other's work to make sure that, you don't miss things. But yeah, it was just kind of neat that it got you got a little bit of flavor from different people. You'll notice that some of them are way more detailed, and those are probably our physics guys.
My husband's a physicist, so I understand.
Yeah, see? Which is great, but sometimes it's painful. Depends on how much you wanted in your answer when you ask a question. But yeah, they're extremely smart and very helpful. So you'll see that there is, as you're working through it, there's different flavor, which is not exactly consistent, but I think it's actually better that way.
Yeah, at least it keeps it interesting.
So one of the other things we did was the field guide to data science. That was
And
a
how
lot
did
of
that
fun.
get initiated? Like, whose idea was it to have a field guide for data science?
I don't know whether it was Josh Sullivan or Peter Guerra, but I'm sure it was the duo of their two brains together. But we all just kind of got in a room together and we're like, hey, this kind of needs to be done and hasn't really been done yet. There's lots of like disparate pieces of data science, and we really need a cohesive picture across the company to be able to tell a client, well, what is data science? When you're signing up for these data scientists, what are you really trying to get? And
So it was originally thought of to be an internal document to be used just with clients, and then later got released publicly, or what was that process?
yeah, as we began to start to produce different pieces of it, so it started to kind of come out in drafts. It became apparent that it was just really something that needed to be more public. And our data science team is pretty strong about the fact that, this is really a community thing and it's an ever-growing thing. It's this never-ending, changing, morphing field. And to kind of say that we know everything is a little presumptuous. There's just so many fields, and not that our team didn't cover a whole bunch of those corners of the world, but it's impossible to say that we cover everything. And so we wanted to then kind of open it up as like with the community, saying, hey, we want feedback. We want, to bring other people in. And you'll see on the second edition, we have numerous people that are now on the second edition of the field guide that are new or different or from other companies, just because it really is, the more heads you kind of bring together, the better it's going to be.
So you mentioned at the beginning that you didn't want to do math just to become a math teacher, but now you're teaching data science through these different products and books.
That is true.
How does it feel to how do you feel about teaching it versus, being really, I guess, like in the field applying it? Or do you still get to do both?
Yeah, so luckily at Booz Allen, I got to do a little bit of everything, which kind of kept me from being bored, which is probably, I don't know, it's one of my qualities that is maybe not a quality, but that I get bored easy. I can't, do the same thing every day, which is one of the nice things about data science is it's generally not. But so being able to do things like the book so that everybody's on the same page, as well as like, okay, and Explore Data Science was built to actually internally train our internal team, like to continually train the people that wanted to become data scientists, which then was later released. But so being able to do those things was fun, but because they were not my sole purpose, I think is what kind of made them just like a little fun thing on the side. That then my main focus has been client-driven in the field problems. So solving problems for pharmaceutical companies or hedge funds or oil and gas, as well as a lot of different, like marketing and things like that as well.
So can you give any examples of those type of projects and what tools you used and what kind of problems you were solving?
Sure. So I've used a broad range of tools because we generally, every time you get dropped into a new contract, you have to use whatever's best for that problem and that client, and that's continuously changing. So my main tools have always been Python is my general go-to. Python, R, JavaScript for different kinds of visualizations like D3, and then when you get into bigger and bigger realms, I still was using a lot of Python initially, and then as things like Spark came out and were available, I've definitely moved to Spark. It's been useful. Now there's things like H2O and TensorFlow is coming out, like becoming more popular. So just trying the different tools based off of what the needs are of the client, which means that I've had to have the ability to continually pick up new languages and new tools while I'm also solving everybody's problems, which is fun. I like the challenge. So an example of a project, let's see. A lot of it's proprietary, so I can't share a whole lot, but there's a lot of projects that I've got to do were social good projects, which is kind of fun. Booz Allen spends a lot of time and investment in those kinds of things. So there's a human trafficking project that I was heavily involved with that we brought in a whole bunch of young girls, and we called it, was it STEM Girls for Social Good was the project. And so we brought in a whole bunch of younger girls and taught them Python programming, and then started building these human trafficking models based off of different demographics and data we were able to acquire in relationships with other companies, and so that was kind of fun. So being able to do that to where we can predict whether or not, like, how a caseload should be. So if, say, some FBI agent has like this huge stack of cases, which ones should he bubble to the top to look at first, as far as which ones would be more likely to be somebody that they really need to pay attention to.
And so what were the data, what did the data look like? What were the inputs for that type of model?
Basic information that you could get from case files. So things like where they've been, if they've been arrested before, how long it's been since they were released from prison, or how many known associates they have, those kinds of things, which incorporate, graph theory, like the social graph, as well as just some other more basic features. But that was kind of the fun part, is they got to spend some time thinking about the feature engineering piece and what could give you insight into this world and things like that. So
yeah, that's great. And I really like that you were able to get younger girls involved to tell them about these possibilities before they go to school, to kind of give them ideas that, we wouldn't necessarily have heard when we were in school.
Yeah, that's so important to me. And I love that, oh man, it seems so crazy that I even left Booz Allen for as much as I'm still such a huge fan. But they put a lot of time and energy into things like that. And so that was one of the reasons why I stayed with them as long as I did.
So you mentioned you left. What do you do now?
So now I'm a chief data scientist at MyStrength, which is a startup company, and they have a product. It's essentially you have a set of apps that work on either your phone or on the computer, and they're based on helping people reach to mental health resources. So whether you're struggling with depression or anxiety or substance abuse, just being able to reach out to some clinically proven research or resources and those kinds of things. So making those available to people no matter whether they live, really far away, but they have a smartphone or whatever is really cool. So I'm, again, still getting to do things that impact, which is important to me, but still doing data science. So I'm hoping to do recommendations and things like that. I'm just jumping in now, getting my feet wet, but it's a great team, and I have lots of exciting ideas to work through with them. So.
And what is it like going to a startup after having been in government and consulting?
Strange, but wonderful. It's, there's good and bad about everything. I'm excited to not be traveling as much, which will be nice, because, if somebody has data that they don't want to let out of their little box, you have to go fly to them. So it's nice that I get to hang out where the data lives, as well as go into a very relaxed office. I don't wear a suit anymore, and the fridge is stocked with fun things and that kind of stuff. It's very much the startup life that people talk about, which is nice. And I think it's really fun to be able to build something and be right there next to people where I can be like, wait a second, I don't understand this. Why are you doing this way? And then instead of having to get on the phone or possibly fly to DC, we can walk over to a whiteboard and figure it out, which is nice.
That's cool. So are you their first data scientist?
I am, sort of. They have more clinically focused people who support it from a statistical point of view, but I'm going to be their first kind of machine learning geared employee, and we're hoping to continue to grow and see how things go. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've kind of covered the gamut in terms of things that you've done from grad school, all the different tools you used, Python and R and recommendation and agent-based systems. So where would you recommend that somebody started if they were interested in getting into what you're doing? Like, for instance, if they're interested in using machine learning to help people, where's a good starting point, and what should they learn first?
That's a good question. I would say figure out what your tool that you enjoy using is. So people can be very successful with many different kinds of tools, whether you're a SAS person or you're an Excel ninja or Python, R, Pig. There's a lot of different tools, and there isn't one specific one that solves everything. So I would say try a couple of different things. Like Code Academy has a nice Python class that I think is free, and you can try it there, see if that's something that clicks with you, and if it doesn't, try something else. So don't feel like the tool is, required. Like don't hold yourself to any specific tool. Somebody tells you that if you don't learn Python, you can't be a data scientist, you tell me eat mine. But as far as that goes, pick a tool that's comfortable for you, and then just try different problems. So Kaggle is an excellent resource for little projects. So try different kinds of things like that, and once you get your feet wet and feel out whether or not it's something you really enjoy, then move forward, because just like any job, it's going to be your job for the rest of your life, right? So if you're going to get really good at something, make sure it's something you enjoy, because it requires a lot of persistence and curiosity to be happy and successful, I think. And for me, I really, really love what I do. I love solving problems and digging down. And if you don't force yourself into something because it's a cool, hip data science thing right now, which I feel like a lot of people are doing. They're like, I need you to turn these people into my data scientists. And I was like, do they know that? Or are they interested? There isn't some magic button to do that for people, but companies would like to think so. So yeah, just kind of feel it out and follow what you enjoy in your heart. And then as time continues on, connect with those people, connect with those professors, connect with those people around you. I'm still strongly connected with a couple people from oil and gas that were studying to be data scientists, and they're brilliant. And so I, make time to connect with them and to continue to help foster that relationship and teach them things, because people did that for me. So reach out, find people who can help guide you and encourage you, even when it's hard, because sometimes you're going to want to pound your head against the wall. But there is a solution. Stay strong.
And then once you figure out that you do like that kind of problem solving and constant learning that data science requires, and you've picked up a tool, how do you get involved in some of the data science for good type of things that you've been involved in?
Well, luckily, Booz Allen kind of orchestrated a lot of that. So it was kind of cheating in terms like that. But there are different events that go on. So there's companies and organizations like DataKind, and they're really there's a lot of people out there who want to do good things. And, when you're beginning to look at positions and being able to position yourself for a career in the path you want to take, consider what's important to you. Not everybody's interested in social issues. Some people are really just driven by, they want to make money. And if you want to do that, then you might want to look at, making ads pop up for people and focus on those kinds of things and those kinds of groups and those kinds of forums, things like that, so you can continue to grow that skill. And then there's other paths. If that's not really what your focus is, if you're worried about mental health, or you're worried about people getting water, things like that, there is a lot of, just get your Google Fu on and find people who are interested, because there's a lot of people who are willing to kind of continue to bring new people on and along and give them direction and things like that. So.
Well, that's great. All right, so I think this is a good point to wrap up, and thank you for all your good advice. So if somebody wanted to find you online and connect with you, where can they do that?
Well, I'm not a super active tweeter, but I am to a certain extent. So I'm at Data Jinja Ninja, and so I do check my Twitter every once in a while. So feel free to tweet at me or send me a direct message or follow me, whatever. I love to connect with other people looking to get nerdy.
That's great. And I'll second that. Twitter is a great place to learn about data science and connect with other data scientists. And that's how I found you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. It was great talking to you.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.